how would you have scaled during this massive time of demand in the mortgage if you didn't have our virtual assistants?
I don't know if you probably make an argument that we wouldn't have, right? At least not at the pace, right? I don't know if I could have hired 6 people and trained them in that 18 months or whatever that year, if they had to be in house or that I had to train them from home. MyOutDesk did such a good job. I was like, hey, I need another person. They're like, boom, there you go. Like, here's 5 people. Like, let's interview, right? So like, that was to your guys' credit, is like, I didn't even have to look anywhere else.
Daniel Ramsey here with MyOutDesk. Super excited because today we have Dan Smith on the show. He is the operations manager for Modern Lending, and we break down exactly what an in-house processor should do versus a virtual assistant. And he goes into massive detail, and he's scaled his business over the last 2 years from 0 virtual assistants to 6, and he drops a lot of good nuggets. So we're here chatting about mortgage and virtual assistant, and I'm curious, like, how's your experience been? Anything we can do to serve you? How are you using our people? Like, all of the good stuff, you know?
Yeah. It's been good, right? We put a lot of time into it. I think we had a pretty good expectation of like, hey, this is ground. Yeah, they're virtual assistants, but they're not going to know anything, right? So we got to take them from like, basically like, here's where we live. I took like a map. Right. I was like, so, I was like, where do you guys live? And I was like, here's where we live. Right. And then I was like, hey, this part of California is broken up into these counties, right? These sections, and that's kind of where we started. And then, and just kind of walk them through and put together kind of a program of like, all right, how do we keep these people up to speed to just know like terminology and the process itself, right? Before you can do anything to help us, like, you got to know kind of what's going on. So that was a big part of that. We started like, and even for the first probably like couple months, it was during the pandemic. So it was probably a good thing that like I was at home, and so nobody was really bugging me. So I got to spend a couple hours every day walking them through. We did like payment scenarios. This is, how loans work, and then that builds on itself. So this is how the mortgage itself works, and this is the interest rate and all these different, property taxes, homeowners. So they got this kind of good sense of how it works. And then we put them into like data entry things into our loan operating system. And then we started having them order third-party items, title and escrow, So we slowly built them up, and they've been great. I think we're like 6 for 7 or something like that of people that we've kept, or 5 for 6 or something like that. We've only had to let go one person, so who couldn't get up to speed. So they've been doing great.
Before you go, and I hate to interrupt, but I have to ask, why did you choose to spend all of that time like walking somebody through what a mortgage is, how to use your systems? I mean, a map, it sounds simple to you and me because we've been in the world, we understand, but another LO or another mortgage company could come in and be like, what do you mean I got to train them? Like, what would you say to them?
So one, you got to expect that they don't know anything, right? Just like anybody else that you hire off the street, right? It's like they don't know anything. And so you can create a checklist, and some people are pretty good at this, of like, and ultimately we can do better at this too, is like you put them in the system and the system doesn't allow them to fail. Like they can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They can't go 1 to 3. It won't let them. Right. Well, our systems weren't set up that way, or not. They weren't. Haven't been evolved enough. Right. We're like 2 years old. Right. Year and a half. The company's pretty young. So, we just had to do it that way for that reason, right? Because there were no safeguards. So you had to teach them properly. And the second part is, if somebody knows why they're doing something and why it's important for the next person down the road who grabs the file or the potential dangers, then they're going to typically be better at doing that type of stuff, right? Well, you can't know that stuff, right? You can't be like, well, this is important because the underwriter needs to see it. They're like, what's an underwriter? They're like, what, how does that work? And so then you got to go like, well, the underwriter is a person who approves the loan. And they're like, well, what, when do they get, it's like, yeah, there's actually like a person there that actually says, yes, here's $500,000, right? It's a very important job, so you kind of, that's why. And then my theory had always been like, it's always a pain in the butt. It's way harder to do it that way, but it's been starting to bear fruit now is like, you're gonna reap those rewards long term. And that if you explain the why, they'll just get better. Whereas if you just tell them do A, B, and C over and over and over again, it's very easy to get in that daze of like, after the initial kind of shock of being an employee for the first couple of months where you're really particular about what you're doing, everything just kind of looks the same and every file is the same, and you're just kind of like and your mind's somewhere else. Where if you're like, no, this is important because Christine, who's the processor on this file, is going to need this information in a couple days, and I don't want to let her down, and I don't want. So trying to build that, that sense of important, and what they're doing is important, and it helps, and it's for the overall process. And then ultimately, we have a person who's probably making the biggest purchase of their life, right? Like, you're a part of that, and we don't screw up. Like, that's why we've gotten to be so good, is like, when we say they're good, they better be good. Like, you can't mess around with that, right? And so there's a very real person. Yeah, you may not talk to them or see them, but there's a very real person on the other end of that. And then you don't want to have them lose a house or an earnest money deposit, or have a terrible transaction where they just want to cry at the end, and it's supposed to be a happy moment when you buy a house, not like, oh my God, I can't believe that was over, thank God it's over type thing, right? So you try to instill some of that stuff into them. And again, it all starts like, none of that works if I just go, hey, take this information and put it there, and then press this email and send it to that person. And that's all the explanation I give them. I just don't think it's the right way to do it. So that's kind of what I tell people when they ask about the virtual assistants, is like, it's going to take some time, but you get in what you put out, or you get out of it what you put in. And then it's, you got to, and it is totally doable. It just takes time.
What's cool is that you magically tied purpose in with a very remedial job, meaning, it reminds me of, what's that? The Ritz. Have you ever heard that guy? There's a guy that led the operations team at the Ritz. And so how do you get a maid and a guy who cleans a room to operate at that level, right? Well, they coined, it's ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. And so they took something that is like cleaning bathrooms and turned it purposeful. And you've magically done the same thing with our virtual assistants.
We're trying. Yeah.
You're trying to. So do you do that with all of your employees, or is it did you just do it with them? Like, what's that look like?
Yeah, so I try to, and again, it's getting a little bit, because we're growing, which is great, but it's getting a little bit more difficult where like I'm a little less hands-on with some of the people, right? So I still try to instill that of when I'm explaining or when I jump in. I have obviously good, excellent partners too, and Excel, who helps me. The virtual assistants basically work for Excel now, and so we trained them together, and I kind of trained them, for different things. But she's got that same attitude, right? So we have two people instilling that of like, look, because I know what it's like to be like in that very repeatable job, right? And it's super. And also I've seen it. I've seen people kind of crumble where you're like, dude, you were fine 3 months ago. What happened? You're like, oh, because you don't. Every time you copy over, it's maybe like doesn't seem important, but like you got like it's part of the process. There's somebody on the other end that's going to affect. And so we try to obviously teach that with our people now. And again, Excel has done a good job of like, we've escalated that to like, this is how you get promoted. This is how you do the next thing, right? Yeah, I know like doing data entry on a file seems boring, but if you can't do that, how am I going to let you in charge of borrower docs to like check to see if they're going to like, if they can qualify or calculate income correctly, so kind of try to play it to these things that are like, hey, there's bigger and better things. And this sucks. And like, maybe it's not the, the most glamorous thing out there, but if I need somebody to do something more important, the person who can do this is the person I'm going to choose, like that's how that's going to work. And so, we haven't got that far with the virtual assistants yet, but that's kind of where we're going. Is like as they get better, we're going to take the best ones and like, hey, we're going to turn them into processors. Like, hey, we're going to need more loans. We might as well get somebody who we know who's intelligent and knows what they're doing, and then we'll teach them more stuff, and then they'll have a good foundation. Man, it's kind of how we've been doing it.
It's cool that you guys have grown so rapidly. You started with 2 in early 2020, and now you're at 6. what made you decide to grow the team, and what about MyOutDesk and the virtual assistants made you take that leap?
Yeah, we did. And I guess kind of like a good thing is like we've had no issues with the MyOutDesk like by itself as a company, right? So like
Right.
time, pay, anything I've asked of them to get, like we got monitors and new computers up, like I no problem. I've had zero problems. Like one of those good things where like I don't have anything to say on that front because there's been no issues for me with the company itself, right? You know,
Yep.
obviously the employees or the contractors, whatever you want to call them, like that's just growing pain type stuff. But like as far as whatever we've needed from the company, we've been able to get and also get to our people, which has been fantastic. So I think Christian's our rep. He does
Yep.
really he's great. So yeah, on that front, and then that's a number one, probably the number one reason. It was just like, hey, I want to hire 2 more people. Cool. And like they handle all that. They're like, Wednesday at 5. I was like, perfect. The less I have to think about it, you just let me know where to go. I'll ask the questions. Good. Ask for disc profiles on everybody. They get them to me like within less than 24 hours.
Yep.
So it's been, all that stuff's been excellent. The expansion was basically because it worked. Like, you know, it was we've probably been a little lucky too, because I know we've hired people too, and like we've had good people come to us, right? And so we keep them, you know, we took advantage of that and kept them. And then so yeah, we're growing, and it's been a good experience overall. So we're like, all right, we'll just keep hiring people to handle these jobs. And like I said, right now is we'll keep doing it as well. Again, kind of my next goal is to take one person that we currently have and put them into like a more almost like junior processor, but like a higher end type of role, right? And we're gonna figure out how we're gonna possibly do that. But yeah, it's good.
Do you find there to, because you guys have a lot of loan officers? I was trolling your website before this call. And do you find at some point you begin to serve your loan officers with giving them access to some leverage? You know, I mean, you guys are rapidly growing. You guys are putting your processes together. I'm just kind of curious what the vision of the future is going to be.
Yeah, so kind of indirectly with the virtual assistants, right? So what we originally had planned, this is we actually kind of deviated where like they were going to assist the loan officers. And that's where we started with like payment scenarios and doing different like looking up property taxes and all and kind of that stuff. And then it kind of no fault of them really, but we kind of like decided to switch. The need was more of like, hey, we need to help the processors, right? So we have 2
Right.
separate companies. Like technically Modern Lending is owned by Brian and Taylor and Excel, and then I own this processing company. And so I can, on paper, I consult for Modern Lending, and I do stuff like this and all the other stuff that I do. And so we're like, well, they need help, right? Is like that's where the bottleneck was. We kind of shifted them over there, and then that's where they've kind of excelled. And so really, if the processors can process more loans, right? The loan officers were bringing it in. That was not a problem. They didn't need any help, right? So we needed to get them through the process, right? So they got the business coming in, like we need to get it closed, right? So that's where we shifted it over. So the better, the more files the processor can do with the help of the virtual assistants, that's how we help the loan officers, right? That's how you help the sales team, right? And that's how we've implemented that and shifted kind of course a little bit in the beginning, but that's been great.
Well, so for people who are considering this, other companies, mortgage companies, loan officers, what part of the process is virtual in your mind now that you've been doing this almost 2 years? And what part stays with the processor, the person who's got, 5-10 years experience, knows underwriting, maybe has a license? What part stays virtual? What part stays in-house?
So the communication with the client stays in-house. Communication with the third-party vendors is virtual. So title, escrow, appraisals, verification of employment, talking to that type of stuff, right? So basically anything that doesn't have to do with contacting the borrower. That's kind of like processing, right? In the loan officers. And that, yeah, so that's how we split that right now. Right now, again, if you have someone who speaks good English and is been a part of the team, there's no reason why you couldn't bring somebody over to that side, right? But that's where that's very much in any good loan officer, like that's very protected, right? That relationship with the
Right,
borrower, with the client, there's the person who's going to give you the reviews. They're going to be the one who refers you their family and friends.
right.
That's how we have it now. Whereas like if they make a mistake with an employer and they obviously they're never like mean or anything, but they make a mistake, it's like, okay, no big deal, right? Like we don't care
Right.
about the employer, we care about the employee, right? That we're helping. And so yeah, that's kind of how we've split that. And yeah, like I said, it seems to be working.
And when it comes to gathering documents, because doing a loan now is almost like writing a Bible. It's like a checklist of 1,000 different things, right? It's crazy. Are the virtual assistants in there just gathering all the the title work, the W-2s, like they're gathering all of the documents, and so they're free to go gather everything? Or
So they gather all third-party docs, so title documents, escrow documents, like I said, appraisal, any sort of verification of employment stuff, all that stuff they're handling, throw it into our loan operating system, forward it to the processor, and then they go here. Personal borrower documents are handled by loan officers and processors. And yeah, and that, again, that's the same thing too. Tight, comfortable with the borrower, that you want to make them feel nice and warm and happy inside so that they don't feel like they're losing their information to people. And it stays very much in a tight knit, kind of as much as like a little family atmosphere. Like, hey, these people are on my team, right? And so it's
super cool. All right. Besides making one of our folks the manager, and then kind of you're going to get leverage for your leverage.
Mhm.
What do you think's next? Are you going to add marketing folks? Are you going to add recruiting folks? A lot of our loan officers, they'll do in-house marketing services for their team, and then also building out a recruitment arm. So out there, kind of finding other LOs that want to join the family, so to speak. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. So the next, and again, this got pushed back a little. The next kind of idea was to take them to the sales side, right? Like get them on the phone with people, right? And then we ended up just hiring like people who are local, right? So that got pushed off a little bit. That was kind of where I was like, the next thing is getting them on the phone and see how we do with that, right? Because if you have people that you can train, that they're comfortable talking to borrowers and they work on the front end, then you really have some confidence. Like this person can absolutely be a processor, right? Like, and my thing is, it's hard to, just like with anybody, even the people that we have like in-house, is one, it's hard to find processors right now because everybody's so busy, right? And two, it's hard to find processors that work the way we work, right? So the best way to do that is to train people from the inside. So my thing is to, again, that bottleneck is still with processing. So that's got to be my solution. And again, I want the virtual assistant to be a part of that, right? Hire another virtual assistant to take, like, let's say Anne's, she's probably like the best one that would be like the most qualified to take that next step. You hire a virtual assistant in, and then you have Anne train the virtual. So it's like, I don't do that, right? Or Excel doesn't. You have Anne train that person to take her job, you promote. So that's kind of how I see it. And then really, if you can complete that, you can take that to any department, really. Like if you have the time to train, right? So you could take it to marketing. You could take it to even be like, what do they call, like a loan officer assistant? So a little bit more on the sales side of the house, right? If you find the right people. So if that were to work, to be honest, I think the most important thing, maybe I'm biased because it's my processing company or whatever, but there's tons of loan officers out there, and they'll like even process or not process their own loans, but like they don't like processing their own loans, and they have all their own salespeople. They have a sales assistant. They have all their own people that they handle, or they handle it themselves, right? And it all comes crashing down into like get the deal done. So that's where in my opinion, like that's where the reputation is built, is in the processing, right? Like getting the deal done in a timely manner, and the borrower is happy. is everything. Well, that all happens from process. When the salespeople can sell it up front and do a great job, right? But if you can't, make good on your word, you're screwed, right? And so
Right.
that is, and loan officers will pay huge for that. So that's kind of what I look at is, hey, let's just build up this army of like badass, processors and back end people, and we'll be like the offensive line who protects like the diva people, right? Like, so, so that's my goal, right? But again, that doesn't mean that you couldn't, like, if you were, let's say if I had to start all over, right? And like, let's say I'm just gonna be a loan officer, right? Well, like, if you started with like a virtual assistant who's, obviously pretty cheap considering, and you taught them, they could do whatever. Again, if they speak, the main thing I think most loan officers, at least what I've talked to them, is like just the English, or like, you got to have somebody that's like the prerequisite, right? Because they don't want to say like, is this person from the Philippines, right? They can have a little bit of an accent, that's not a problem. But like if it's heavy, unfortunately, because people use like virtual assistants or people in India for like all that stuff, and you've been on calls like that where you're like,
yep,
I'm trying, man, but I can't I can't understand you, like that type of stuff is the biggest hurdle I would see that as far as salespeople and loan officers would have the problem with is, but again, like I said, like now with the people that we have, there's at least, I wouldn't have any problem putting them on the phone with a borrower. There's probably two people, of the six, right? That I'm like, I'm good. Not necessarily, not the English or the speaking thing, but just like the knowledge thing. So they'd be fine. They'd be fine on the phone. So it's one of those things, people get a little bit gun shy about that stuff, but it's like, if you work with them and you trust them, then the accent thing becomes less of an issue, if that makes sense. So
yeah, trust will do a lot to bridge a gap. I'm curious, Dan, how would you have scaled during this massive time of demand in the mortgage if you didn't have our virtual assistants?
It's a good question. I don't know if you'd probably make an argument that we wouldn't have, right? At least not at the pace, right? I don't know if I could have hired 6 people and trained them in that 18 months or whatever that year. If they had to be in house, or they had to train them from home, like, I guess technically it's kind of the same thing, but I don't know if I could have found 6 people. I didn't really look, because again, part of that thing is like, it was MyOutDesk did such a good job. I was like, hey, I need another person. They're like, boom, there you go. Like, here's 5 people. Like, let's interview, right? So like, that was to your guys' credit, is like, I didn't even have to look anywhere else, right? It was like, I needed people. I'm good to go. But so it's hard for me to answer that exactly, but you could definitely, if you thought about it, you'd be like, all right, well, I don't think I could have. I probably would have had to wait. So, you could tell people that, I'd be like, yeah, I don't know for sure, but it probably would have been a struggle, would be my guess.
What do you think you've saved having a blended model where you have an in-house processor supported by a couple of virtual assistants? Like, what do you think has dropped to your bottom line because of that model?
So it's probably at least, for those like 6 people, it's probably half, at least 50% savings, right? Minimum, right? Because if you're looking, because I think they make, I have to look, I don't even know. We do give them a bunch of overtime too, which is that I'm sure they love, but that's kind of a benefit, right? Like, I don't monitor them at all. Like, it's they are crushing it, so it's okay. But initially, I think they were making like $1,700 a month, right? So you're talking about, minimum 50, if not $4,000 is what, 36, or $4,000 is what, 48. And so what is that? 50 to 60% savings, just bought like right off the top savings wise.
And all that money drops to your bottom line. The difference in the cost is just profit for you.
That doesn't include, like, if you look at it from like turnover aspect, right? Time. Like, I'm part of it's luck, right? But we got 6 of 7. We hired 7 people, we still have 6. I think we hired 4 and kept 2 people in house. So technically, by percentage wise, that's crushing it. So, obviously the data is probably not there to make an absolute conclusion, but you can look at that as well. And again, not to get too much into that, but like, they're awesome. Like, they're super grateful for work, and I was, I was like, you guys are crushing it. You guys are earning it. You don't have to thank me for anything, right? Like you guys are
Right.
great. There is a part of that too. That's like some attitude issues, right? Just with the culture, I guess. They're super thankful. They're awesome. And whereas like sometimes you'll hire people and anybody is just like with them. And again, we've had a really good experience. So can't complain too much, but like anybody can fool you for 30 minutes on an interview or an hour in an interview. And then you get them in here and it's like, whoa, what happened to that person that I met, a week
Yeah,
ago, right?
totally.
So
Totally.
we haven't had to deal with any of that, and which is great. So
That's cool, man. All right. Well, is there anything we can do to help serve you as you grow and as you expand? I mean, this has been great. Thanks for your time today.
yeah, of course, no, keep doing what you're doing. Like I said, sometimes I'm a little scatterbrained sometimes, and you guys they always keep me back. They always get me back in line where I'm like, hey, I need people, and they're like, hey, I need you to fill this out, and they'll follow up with me, and they get me back in line, and kind of it's the best like gentle persuasion that I've probably experienced where they're like, hey, we're gonna do interviews today, right, or tomorrow, and so yeah. So yeah, you guys just keep doing what you're doing. I don't really have, I mean, as far as like trying to give you guys constructive criticism or anything, like I'll let you know. Like I don't think I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but like like I said, was it like it's been
You don't have
pretty
to make you don't have
pretty
to
good.
make them up any if you
Yeah,
love us
yeah.
how
It's
we
like
are.
yeah, like I said, like I don't. It's not off the top of my head. I can't think of anything where I was like, oh man, I wish they did this, or I wish this was better, or
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
better. Yeah, they've been great. Christian, I forget, I can't remember her name, but she's the one who takes care of all the interviews for us. She's been excellent too, like finding replacements. Like, because we did have a couple interviews where like kind of like, hey, can you find some more? And then she
Yeah,
got
yeah.
one or two more afterwards the next day, and
Yep.
she does do a good job of like, um, because we usually like we'll talk and Itzel and I will talk about it. And she's like, well,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like this happened to us before. We're like, hey, we like so and so, and then they're like, she's gone. Like I was like, okay. I was like, I know. You said you told me, you warned me, and I was like, all right. So it's like, so Sandy, like, which is great because you guys are having people hire people within like 12 hours of interviewing or whatever it is, and it's like, yep, all right. Well, I knew, but we have our kind of our little process. So we've actually lost like one or two like that where we waited a day and we lost them, but same thing. It's been working out. So
Yeah. One thing, one thing that you guys, I'm still a big fan of you figuring out a way to recruit with our people. And I don't know if you could package that into a service for your partners,
yeah.
but each loan officer is worth, $20,000-$30,000 of profit to a business, to a mortgage company. So
On that note, you did like kind of like pique my interest a little bit, right? Now again, we're not there yet. Like again, we're just trying to keep our head above water, right? But at some
yeah,
point, like I told the guys, right? Because I do a lot of like the operation stuff, right? So they're the sales guys. And I was
right.
like, you guys need to get like this thing's getting not my outdesk, but like the other thing is like your overhead's getting up there. Like you need to get some people who in here who are going to make you money. And
Yeah.
so, do you guys have? I would like to kind of pick somebody's brain, or if you guys have something like, how exactly are they? Because that's not really what I've thought about. Is they're using the virtual assistants to recruit? Is that just kind of just getting on the phone of like, hey, I see you're with so and so, like we got great prices over here, and you want to check this out? And like just kind of putting feelers out there to different loan officers. Is that kind of what they're doing, or is there something more better or
Yeah.
more?
Here's what I would suggest. You know how you guys have a process now for loans? Like,
Mhm.
hey, check rates, find out what your house is worth, get in a relationship with a real estate broker. You guys have like different funnels for getting loans in. And it's the same thing when you're recruiting for people. You just take out loans and put loan officers, right? So how
Mhm.
do you get loan officers? You do email campaigns, you have a value proposition, you have a script that you reach out to, you invite them to drinks, or I don't know what you guys do,
Yeah, no,
right?
yeah, that makes sense.
All,
Yeah, they all like
all
to
the
drink.
things, right? All the things. You maybe create an inside in the office, you create a loan officer referral program. So, your loan officers in-house are helping you make introductions. You nominate one person in your team, like you're nominated for the process, the operations piece. So one person is a recruiter, and all they do is try to get more loan officers, and you start building a funnel. really where you can use our people is just, number one, marketing, because it's just that's part of attracting talent, right? But number two, I think it's a game of just reaching out. It's just like, hey, we wanted to let you know we're in town. We want to let you know that we funded $2 billion. We want to let you know that we grew by 30% last year. We want you to know that we have a great processing team, and you'll never have to worry about loan falls out, all the things. And so you just have to build out a,
that's awesome. Yeah, sometimes it's nice to sometimes you get so inside your box, right? Like you need the outside, some ideas to kind of just start thinking a little bit differently. So
yeah, man. And it's just a talent game. Like you put ads out on ZipRecruiter, you put ads out on LinkedIn, you put ads out on Facebook, you put ads out there, and then somebody calls, and then our virtual assistants reach out to them, send them information, qualify them, whether it's a new loan officer or an existing loan officer. You probably have two different funnels, right? And it's it's just the same,
That's awesome. Yeah, that's good stuff, man.
Let's build it. I want you guys to have 10. I want you to have 10.
We'll like I said, the next one will be like a hard, like it's a good step, but it'll take some time, right? Because you gotta watch the new person train watch the person train the person, right? So you're like 2 degrees away in separation, but like if that can get going, then that's sky's the limit then after that, because then you're like, okay, now they're running like their own department, and you're like, that's someone's in charge of it and they're doing it, and I just talked to one person and you're good to go. And so yeah, we'll that's probably my goal for the beginning of the year once it slows down, and then we'll see how it goes. But I'm like, everything else has been great. So
cool, man. Well, it's an honor to meet you. Thanks for your time. We'll reach out if there's anything you need. We're here. And if you want to build that thing, I'd love to be involved. It's my favorite thing to do, is talk through this strategy stuff.
Talking shop is one of my favorite things to do. So it's all good.
I know, right? It's the only thing I'm good at. So
that's good. All right, I appreciate the time. Yeah, thank you very much.